Hi, welcome to the panel discussion at the YASED International Investment Summit 2020. This panel is going to look at the topic of global supply chains, reshaping roots and the economy behind. My name is Marc Miller. I'm honored to be the host and the moderator for this panel discussion. So welcome. We have four eminent speakers to join me in discussing the future direction of global supply chains. We have Mr. Torben CARLSEN. He's the President and Chief Executive Officer of DFDS, and Torben is joining us from Copenhagen. So hi, welcome Torben, thank you for joining us. We have Mr. Jean-François. He's the Senior Vice President of Global Baby Care Product Supply at Procter & Gamble, and he's joining us from Geneva. So John, hi, welcome. Thank you for joining us. We have Jean-François SALLES. He's the Alliance Supply Chain Global Vice President for Groupe RENAULT, and he is joining us from Paris. So Jean-François, welcome. Thank you for joining us. And our fourth speaker is Marc NOLLA. He's the Vice President for SAP EMEA South, and Marc is joining us from Madrid. So Marc, welcome, and thank you all our esteemed speakers for joining us. In the context of our discussion, I believe we're on the cusp of a thrilling new era for global supply chains. This coronavirus crisis has vividly exposed the profound interdependencies in today's global supply chain ecosystems and powerfully demonstrated the inherent risks in our complex connected world. Amongst unprecedented geopolitical tensions, COVID-19 has already proved to be a super accelerator of several pre-existing trends, including e-commerce everywhere and digital everything. I foresee that over the medium term through to the year 2025, we will see some restructuring and reconfiguration of global supply chains, many of them adopting a much more regional approach, spelling changes to globalization as we have become to know it. This will inevitably result in shorter supply chains that increase control, responsiveness, and resilience, whilst reducing lead times, transport costs, and emissions. In the next normal for global supply chains, I believe that resilience, digitalization, and sustainability will become the key strategic priorities and essential criteria for competitive advantage. In this panel discussion, we will explore these and other critical dimensions for the future of global supply chains. So let me invite each of our panelists in turn to share their opening comments about the future for global supply chains and how COVID-19 has affected them. If I may start in Copenhagen with Torben. Over to you, Torben, please, for your opening comments.
Thank you, Marc. I can certainly try to give a perspective from DFDS. We are a ferry and logistics operator with also heavy presence in Turkey. When COVID hit in March, in our case, our first priority was to make sure our people were safe. It was to make sure that the interactions we had with suppliers, with customers, could keep everybody safe. Because of course we quickly realized, and at that time, without knowing exactly how dangerous the virus was, that it was now the frontline employees that were key to our survival and continued operation. We have people on board our vessels, obviously. We have them in the ports, in warehouses, and it is almost impossible for these frontline employees to avoid contact with each other or with suppliers, drivers, and other customers. So we kept a lot of focus on that and continue to have that as the second and third waves are raging. And then, of course, just to put puts a little perspective, we of course also had to look at the safety of or health of the company. In late March, early April, we could see that our passenger business shut down completely. Our freight business, at the time, very, very difficult to predict the situation. I have to be careful with a colleague from Renault on here, but my understanding was that all car factories throughout Europe shut down in shorter or longer periods, and that is an important customer group for DFDS. So we were standing mid-April, not knowing what the future would bring, and therefore we also had to make sure the company was safe, and as many other companies had to secure cash resources. Once we had those things looked after, we turned to trying to predict or analyze how would this change our future or the supply chains impact or design going forward, and try to also look at how do we need to adjust our company to reflect this. Our first reflections were that proximity becomes very important. We invested in Turkey in 2018, assuming that Turkey would be a global winner with a very, very skilled workforce, an abundance of skilled people, and an economic growth that would continue. What we reflected upon with the COVID was that, and it came on the back of a trade war as well between primarily US and China, but of course involving all the major regions of the world. And we were seeing as a regional European operator that to actually benefit it. Personally, I don't like trade wars. I think it's wrong, but as a regional European company already then we realized that this could mean that, for example, our operations in Turkey would benefit, as I'm sure global companies like Procter & Gamble and Renault and others realize that it's too dangerous to rely on too much distance. And of course, with the COVID, that realization came overnight. We could see that many of the customers that we had that closed down was not because they couldn't keep their people safe or because the demand disappeared, but because their supply chains broke down. And this has just led us to believe that countries in Eastern Europe, Portugal, North Africa, and Turkey will be benefiting from this proximity that we also hear from our customers, both our automotive customers and our textile customers in particular, that the proximity becomes number one, and we can already see companies that have taken the opportunity to move from Southeast Asia to Turkey, among others, with their production. So for not to take all the time, I'll stop here, but happy to come back with the questions, of course.
We certainly will. Thank you very much, Torben, for those opening comments. So safety of the people, safety of the business, or health and safety of the business, and then how important proximity becomes in this new world of restricted access to travel. That's great. That's great to start us off. John, could I ask you to go next and tell us about Procter & Gamble and how COVID-19 is affecting your global trade and supply chains?
Sure. As Procter & Gamble, we touch and improve the lives of 5 billion consumers every day in 180 countries with our high-quality products in 65 brands such as Ariel, Tide, Fairy, Head & Shoulders, Gillette, Pampers, Always, etc. Consumers all over the world rely on our products to keep their homes, clothes, and themselves clean and hygienic. During COVID-19, the demand for most of our products increased as superior performance and trusted brands matter even more in these unprecedented times. One of our key principles during COVID-19 has been serving our consumers globally without disruption, since in many cases our products are essential products. We rely heavily on global supply chains for our finished product and raw and packed materials in most of our global businesses. As you can imagine, we have faced and continue to face many challenges in our global supply chains due to port congestions, transportation delays, border closures, export bans, shipment container availability, staffing shortages at our suppliers and in our facilities, trucking capacity, just to name a few. We have also seen a surge in demand in many of our products due to panic buying and a significant ongoing demand increase in some of our products like fabric, home care, and healthcare products, as consumers spend more time at their homes and there's an increased health, hygiene, and cleaning focus. So I'm happy in a way and very, very proud to share that we have so far managed all of these challenges in the best possible way. And we're successful in minimizing the supply chain disruptions and product availability issues in our markets globally, enabling our company to continue with its strong momentum and post very strong results in the last quarters. The key to our success has been exactly as you were mentioning at the beginning, really, the resilience part, right? But what we noticed is the resilience of our people, particularly the frontline employees that work in our plants and distribution centers. That combined with the work that we have done in our supply chains, I would say over the last decade, that made a significant difference for us. Our focus over the last decade on end-to-end synchronization, our integrated work system, we call it IWS, it's our production system, and automation. Digitalization of our manufacturing and supply chain planning processes and business continuity planning, together with the supplier relations, enabled us to enter the pandemic in a strong position from supply chain standpoint. However, I believe none of us were prepared for a disruption of this magnitude. So later in our talk, I will talk about our strategies and focus areas moving forward.
Interesting your comments about how the pandemic and the resulting lockdowns and people being forced to stay at home has triggered an increase in demand for your products, many of them being essential home care and personal care items. That's a very interesting dimension. Thank you for your opening comments. Jean-François, may I turn to you next for your comments on how Renault has been affected by the COVID-19 in terms of your supply chain and your business more broadly.
Yes, thank you, Marc. To jump maybe on my colleagues' comments. Renault, as you know, automotive industry is a very global industry, quite complex network from the suppliers, tier 1, tier N suppliers, to our plant assembly plants and then distribution of vehicles. So this very complex system is quite sensitive to any hazard. And this pandemic, by the way, just highlighted the need for more resilience, and we'll come back, I guess, in the discussion later on what resilience covers. But when the pandemic started, and actually that was from December that we started to see the first signals from China, our whole supply chain started to move and had to adapt to the situation in Wuhan area because of the suppliers and sometimes unique suppliers that were installed there and supplying parts to our European or other regional plants. And then all the supply chain, the transport chain moved to adapt to this until it came to Europe, starting in Italy with one single supplier able to block or freeze a whole entire system of production. However, we continue to adapt until the lockdown went into reality in Europe, and then actually the stop was more linked to the commercial activity stop, and because there was no more flow of vehicles all along the pipelines, all the system upstream was to stop, and we decided to stop the plants. We did it in the first wave and in the first pandemic wave in Europe in a very brutal way, I would say. Almost overnight, we had to stop plants. We left lots of containers and trucks in the flows, idle. And my colleagues from DFDS know what happened at that time. That was not so pleasant, by the way, and we had to face that. And first, to make sure that we secured our people, make sure that the safety was at the very top priority all over our activities in the plants, in the reception of transports and so on, and then secure the company itself, as you know, with cash issues and how to protect the economics of the company. Then we learned, we restarted the activities just because we stopped everything in a quite brutal way. The main topic was how to resynchronize all this complex network of supply from all our suppliers, all our transport flows. And we did it in a very systematic way, relied a lot on digital, and we can come back on the importance of digital in our supply chain end-to-end. And we learned from this first wave to adapt. However, we still now, everything has restarted. We still live in a very fragile environment. It's still extremely sensible and sensitive to the surge or resurge of this pandemic. We could see in Eastern countries, Eastern European countries, where it restarted more than in the Western countries. Could see some difficulties in suppliers having to find people, etc. So this came to some important learnings. One about resilience, and I would like to come back on robustness and resilience. The proximity of the suppliers, it was already touched upon, but this is an important point. And in case of Renault and Oyak Renault, we are developing more and more local supplier footprint in order to reduce the sensitivity of the final assembly to all the supplier footprint. The end-to-end connected supply chain. And I think one additional point is the necessity, the need for more collaborative work among all the stakeholders, transport, OEM, suppliers, and finance, in order to have a much more adapted supply chain to the new challenges that are coming in the next years.
Great, thanks, Jean-François. So a bit of a different story there, and by nature of your sector, I guess that tightly integrated, multi-tier, globalized supply chain resulted with the restrictions that the COVID imposed on having to stop down the plants rather abruptly. So some key learnings there. I'm sensing this topic of resilience coming through as a common theme, and also proximity. We'll come back and revisit your thoughts, all of you, about how the globalization landscape may be changing in the coming years. So thank you very much, Jean-François. Let's turn to Marc now. Marc is in Madrid. Welcome. And thank you. From the SAP perspective, Marc, how do you see COVID-19 affecting global trade and supply chains for you and obviously for your customers?
Thank you very much, Marc. If you'll allow me to, I'd like to bring in more the focus and perspective of digital transformation. So from SAP, we've been supporting now for a number of years, customers deploy a digital supply chain strategy. Before the pandemic, if I had to point out maybe three focus areas, three challenges we were trying to address with our customers, the first one would have been bring more customer centricity to the supply chain. Use technology to better sense customers' experiences, expectations across the whole supply chain. So with your products, with your design, with the services in your logistics. But also be able to bring in technology to sense demand, to predict demand, to understand what was going on. The next challenge area, and very close to that end-to-end synchronizing shared by Procter & Gamble, was to create a total visibility, to really bring an end-to-end process with a single source and flow of data throughout the whole supply chain, from design to manufacturing, to delivery, to operations, and the complete plan of the supply chain. When we had that intelligence, we could then really focus on supply chain performance and focus, for example, on delivery in full and in time to really satisfy those customer needs. We could then, for example, bring in new methodologies and not focus only on working towards forecast or plan, but bring in, for example, demand-driven MRP based on artificial intelligence, machine learning, to have strategic budgets to be able to face maybe to disruption or demand signals in the market on a daily basis. But also we worked on bringing new technologies like the Internet of Things to do connected manufacturing, to have the flexibility to adapt to changes, to configure to customers' demand and need. Also to bring more efficiency by avoiding unplanned downtimes through predictive maintenance, you name it. When the pandemic hit, each one of those three challenges are still there, still a strong focus, and I think all the colleagues in this roundtable have mentioned them, but we saw additional ones really coming to the forefront. The main one, also mentioned by other colleagues on this roundtable, resilience. How could we help customers through technology recover sooner from the current disruption, but be prepared to address future challenges? And then we have seen through technology, strangely enough, that the total visibility, increasing that visibility can really help. And not only across the supply chain areas of the business, but really bringing in data from other areas. So supply chain managers have asked us, help us to pivot from supply chain performance to cash flow risk, to employee health and safety risk, and then be able to connect, for example, to networks. That's a really strong strategy right now when I can reach out to my ecosystem and identify, for example, a supplier risk before it happens. I can use a supplier network to find alternative sources really quickly. The other key area we have seen, and it's something I'd really like to debate with in the roundtable, is the growth of focus on purpose, company, brand purpose, having a positive impact in our operations, clear focus on sustainability. And I think that has really increased after the pandemic, this risk we're seeing, this systemic model and how we can influence from the business world. So there we're focusing strongly on helping tracking carbon footprint across the whole supply chain. We're focusing, of course, on circular economy models through the networks. So in summary, with the pandemic, I'm seeing an acceleration from linear supply chains, focusing on cost, on efficiency, moving much more into circular, network, systemic approaches that are focusing on resilience, profitability, and sustainability. And that's what I'd really like to discuss today.
Okay, that's great. Thanks very much, Marc. So the digital supply chain strategy you were working on with your customers pre-pandemic on those three key areas that you mentioned, but as a result of the coronavirus crisis, those same challenges were there, but the additional challenges that you've mentioned about resilience and networks and total visibility and the ability to recover and be prepared. Excellent. And then you touched then on sustainability. So if I may, I'll link into that topic just now and come to our I think if I may go to the two brands first and then come back to DFDS and Torben. But from the respective brands' perspective, and let's start with John and P&G, how is COVID-19 and the next normal, how is that going to change, or not maybe, what you're doing in the area of sustainability and specifically sustainable supply chains?
I mean, there are a couple of things that we anticipate post-COVID, right? So first, we anticipate that the recovery of the global economy will be slow and purchase power of consumers will decrease in many markets. So this increases for us the importance of our productivity and loss elimination work. We also believe that the pressures on the global supply chains will be very high due to transportation capacity, market industry consolidations, and a fast evolving regulatory landscape. So as a result, improving the supply chain resilience will continue to be on top of our agenda. And finally, as you mentioned, the sustainability interest will continue to grow. So there will be a stronger focus on energy, water, and waste reduction, and biodegradable products. So now, I mean, we already were working on those areas to improve the sustainability, but we see that there will be a significant acceleration of the work in the area of sustainability. And we also believe that the work that we are doing on end-to-end synchronization will be a key enabler to sustainability, because at the end of the day, the purpose of that work is reducing the supply chain time, reducing the distances, and everything that we do in those areas will enable us to reduce the waste, right? To reduce the carbon gas emissions. So that's really what we are going after. And one key trend or one key important item for us will be also the whole work with our suppliers on biodegradable products. It is important that we accelerate our work in this area. We identify the right raw and pack materials for our products that are biodegradable, because the importance of that will continue to increase. So we see the work in summary in two areas, right? One is the whole work on energy, water, waste reduction, and the other work which touches our supply chains, and there the work that we have been doing in the loss elimination in our factories, and then supply chain time reduction will be a huge help. And then the second area will be really designing or developing more products that are biodegradable, really replacing most of our raw and pack materials with biodegradable alternatives, and going primarily in our industry more and more plastic free.
Okay, thanks very much, John. So Jean-François, from the Renault perspective and the sustainable supply chain or more sustainable supply chain angle, how do you see things moving on as we get to the next normal after COVID?
Marc, maybe to elaborate on what John said, just before, we also see the same trends, meaning that probably the recovery of economy will be in a slow pace, but this is going to force the industry to adapt and to eliminate losses and to be more ambitious in terms of savings around the environmental friendly solutions. And anyway, this is combined with society evolution. So probably from a region to another, there can be a different speed of change, of transition. But ultimately, it's going to happen. It's going to happen. And we have to prepare to this. The company not preparing for this is not preparing the future, frankly speaking. So we have to do so, and we are doing so. And frankly speaking, there are massive opportunities everywhere in the supply chain. On the very physical stuff, like filling the containers, filling the packaging in a much better way than it is done in many occasions than today. That's a very simple way that it's not requiring rocket science. That's very, very simple and can be done all over the industry. But developing more, we have opportunities on network design, much more smart network design on the flows, using support of digital tools, using all activities also around AI to anticipate things around the flows, avoiding massive congestion, avoiding flows that or using flows that are more virtuous than others. We have also solutions on the co-use of transport. I mentioned collaboration before. We have to think about using transport means in a collaborative way between different types of industries, because the flows are not, or the containers, the transport are not used in the best possible way just because there is division between the industries, between the companies, and there are opportunities to better use the existing assets of transport to save kilometers or to save filling of the transport. And then obviously we as industry we will support and push for innovation on the transport means, on the energy and the powering of the transport. That's what we are doing and pushing on the maritime flows, for instance, pushing for green energy. There are initiatives on using more winds to support fuel of the transport, using more rail, and going for innovative solutions like electric and hydrogen.
Okay. All right, great. Thanks, Jean-François. So that leads us nicely, Torben, into the transport and logistics segment. So we were talking there about a collaborative approach, maybe across industry segments, to better collaborate and improve the utilization of the transportation assets, and therefore get some beneficials from a sustainability and environmental perspective, as well as business benefits, of course, as well. How is DFDS progressing with those sort of initiatives, and do you see your role as the if you like, the third-party provider to be able to embrace clients from across different industry segments, and maybe take the role of bringing them into the fold of sharing transportation assets that maybe they wouldn't under normal circumstances be willing to undertake?
This is the nature of our business, and of course I don't know Jean-François personally, but what he's expressing here is what we hear, of course, from most automotive producers. We are connecting, if we stick with Turkey now, we are connecting Turkey to Europe through daily departures from Istanbul, from Mersin to both Italy and France. Of course, carrying both Renaults and Mercedes and Volkswagen on the same vessels. The reason that automotive, for example, these days use the vessel rather than the land in many cases is because the CO2 total emissions are lower. And what we are building is then, for example, in Trieste, where the ships from Turkey will arrive, we are engaging with intermodal and rail solutions to bring, for example, Renaults from Trieste to Düsseldorf or other places. And that is very difficult for one customer to have to commit to a full train, etc. But there we can go to 8 different customers and get their commitments, and then arrange a train rather than maybe land transportation for that section. So we are, when the COVID hit, the two strategic things we did not stop was our climate challenge and our digitization. And the climate challenge in our industry is enormous. DFDS, if Denmark had to calculate all our CO2 emissions from our vessels, we would be 2.5% of Denmark's total CO2 emission. So we have to take this extremely seriously. And it doesn't really matter about what the regulators do, because people like Jean-François will come after me much before the regulators, because of the promises that our customers make to their end consumers. So we have come up with a plan for how we can deal with our current vessels in the short run, which is until 2030, and live up to a 45% reduction in CO2 emissions in that period. And then in parallel look at how do the new vessels look like, the hydrogen or the different new fuels that we are looking at. Because the calculation that Jean-François and Jean do today in CO2 emissions may change the day that you have autonomous trucks that can drive on solar energy. You know, am I all of a sudden in trouble with my 15 vessels going from Turkey to Europe because they have more CO2 emission? I may still win on speed and reliability and proximity, but in the end, if the end consumers want a zero emission, we need to be ready with that transformation and work very, very closely with our big customers who all have the same mindset, and where they can see that their logistics supply chain is responsible for a lot of their CO2 emission, and therefore we will have to live up to our responsibility there.
Okay,
I'll stop there.
All right, great. Well, that's
just one final thing. I talked about the customers now. Our employees as well. If we don't address this, we will not be able to attract the most skilled and talented employees. They want to see us take this responsibility as well. So sorry, that was the two reasons why we cannot drop this constant focus on the climate challenge.
Right, good. Thanks very much. And indeed, I think we're in the decade and decades to come now where the awareness that we have as consumers, as employees, as business owners of the environmental agenda is such that it's pretty unanimous that everybody wants to see corporations and business making efforts towards more sustainable supply chains and sustainability in the products and the manufacturing itself. You mentioned, in addition to the climate challenge, you mentioned digitalization, Torben, but didn't go into it. So if I may lead into that topic now and ask you if you continue on, and then I want to bring Marc in and see specific examples of how companies are going to be able to improve their digitalization as we go forward in the next normal. So Torben, if I may stick with you, I'd continue on about your digitalization angle.
Absolutely. Of course, I think we all realize that, and nothing against SAP, but that Microsoft helped us out with the Teams and the different tools. Had this happened 10 years ago, I think we would have all been in a much worse situation, right? I think we all have seen that things we have done on the digital side has not been used to the fullest extent, but that certainly has happened now where things have been tested. The way we work together obviously was saved by our digital office tools, and what we have also seen is that our sales effort, the way we connect with customers, and it wasn't triggered by COVID, but of course we have kept focusing on do we need to manually interface with a long tail of rather small customers, or can we build standard systems for these customers that will even improve their service experience with DFDS, because they have easy access to information that it is very difficult for us manually to deliver. That is the journey we are on, trying to standardize the smaller and the standard requests. And then, quite frankly, although we also need to digitize the way we work with the guys of Renault, there we need to have the resource to adapt more to these larger corporations, and Procter & Gamble as well, of course, and say, okay, this is how they want to deal with us. Then we have systems that can relatively easy make sure that they get the information they need from us. We know it takes more effort, but it is also large customers, and the more we can integrate digitally with our large customers, quite honestly, the more difficult it becomes for them to get rid of us. So we have a very strong focus on wanting to integrate deeply with our key customers, and of course, you know, if you don't deliver, they get rid of you anyway, right? But if you change it from being a yearly or biannually, you know, focus and discussion about price, but rather about how, with some of the circular things, the collaboration things that Jean-François mentioned, if we can deliver some of that, we may have the luck that it's not just about getting the last euro of discount, but it's also about how we jointly can deliver value, both in terms of supply chain resilience, if we use that word that we've used a lot here, but also the whole sustainability climate thing, where if you as a customer just change us every second, you know, we cannot build these intermodal solutions, you know, et cetera, that will all get us there. So that's how we use digital.
Okay, great. So a couple of key points I picked up on there. One is to have standardized, ready-to-go systems for, if you like, a large volume of relatively smaller customers. And then at the high end is to have the technological integration with those large customers to enable information exchange and all the other things that we want to get benefits from the digitalization. So Marc, if I may turn to you from the SAP perspective, what experience can you share with us about how those two issues are being addressed? If you like, lower end, off-the-shelf standardization, easy to onboard solutions, and then at the higher end, you know, corporate organizational integration across technology platforms that I know can be quite difficult to achieve and even more difficult to undo if one of the partners wants to undo it. Marc.
Absolutely. So if you'd allow me to, I'd just like to close out the topic of sustainability and digital transformation.
Sure. Yes.
Just, from our perspective, just to mention, and sustainability has become really at the core of digital transformation and our whole strategy of how we're supporting industries. Just to mention there, it's very important, first of all, the focus to help organizations measure their impact. So we really feel we cannot really address sustainably any topic we cannot measure. So that's what we call Climate 21. For example, across the whole supply chain, be able to measure down to a specific product, what is the carbon footprint? And there we're helping companies like NOLLA in the food industry, natural ingredients, measure the footprints of 20,000 products, starting from the carbon footprint of the products they are getting from their suppliers, their energy, their own logistics and production. So once we've got that, the aim, and going back to those corporate systems, is to really work around what we call that triple bottom line. So of course you're managing your top line, your bottom line as discussed, but we bring in the externalities like carbon footprint to address the green line. And that's really when we connect, when we're working on energy efficiency, when we're working on zero waste models and creating those networks that Torben was mentioning. But it's the only way we can really address these systemic challenges, creating circular economy, enabling those networks. So to the specific question on maybe what other technologies we see here and really that are driving this transformation in what I would call, and I took this from one of our customers here in Spain, never normal. I think we talk about the new normal, whatever, but I really like the topic, never normal, and that's the world we need to think and how we operate. So I would mention maybe 4 strategic technologies that I think are really going to support these models. The first one is, of course, and really enhanced by the impact of the pandemic, the adoption of cloud services. When we can distribute, when we can enable our customers to adopt technology really at the speed of their need as a service and quickly integrate it, as Torben, you're mentioning, to third-party solutions and combine the application that you really need for that service to your end customer. So it's speeding up the delivery, access to new technologies like machine learning, where you can get data trained by a third party. You don't have to do that in-house, where you can quickly integrate no matter where that software is coming from. So cloud we see as an essential element for driving this never normal. Another key area in supply chains has been all the impact of the Internet of Things, now enabled and will be highly scaling up thanks to 5G technology, which is enabling what we call Industry 4.0. That's really going to allow us to create those environments of connected manufacturing, of really having those scenarios where we connect to our products, to our assets, can do predictive maintenance, and create really the circular economy. The circular economy is based because I remain in contact with my product. I can trace where's that plastic being disposed. I can trace, is that garment potentially being available for another third party. So we see really that capacity to stay connected, very important for this disruption. The key element there will be what I would group as intelligent technologies. How do we bring advanced analytics, machine learning and robotics to really bring the efficiency on this data? So one of the things we see is moving away from event or transaction driven supply chains, where we can bring the capacity to focus more on the predicting demand signal, predicting failure of a potential asset, a potential future disruption based on supplier risk. So that's where we're driving advanced analytics and machine learning, as I was mentioning at the beginning, on demand-driven MRP, to really have the buffers, but learning continuously from our decisions. A key area we're seeing, for example, with customers in the automotive industry, we've worked with is robotics and robotic process automation. When the pandemic hit and suddenly there was this huge influx of supplier demand, will I be paid? Will you continue to demand these components? Some customers told us they went from 10 inquiries from suppliers to almost 1,000 a day. That kind of disruption in your processes, in your core processes, requires automation and that kind of intelligence. So we see robotics also playing a strong role in maintaining in this never normal the consistency, the service to your customers across the whole supply chain. And maybe a bit more on the edge, but we think important and taking on every time a more present role is blockchain technology and zero knowledge trust technology, where we can trace the origin of products, where we can validate the safety of food, the ethical sourcing of plastic, of materials, and send that throughout the whole supply chain without needing to intervene with the other players. So cloud, IoT, intelligent solutions, blockchain, all available as a service and for fast adoption. We see that as the key strategy to support in this new world.
Great, thank you, Marc. So gentlemen of the brands, John and Jean-François, so we've heard the digitalization angle, if you like, from the transport service provider representatives from Torben at DFDS, and from the technology provider perspective, Marc, from SAP. So if you like, as the users, as the customers of these, how does that fit in with how you are approaching your digitalization strategies for your supply chains going forward? And Jean-François, if I may go to you first, the topic of digitalization.
Yes, obviously it sounds very sensible to develop more digital. And by the way, it's not something that has been triggered by COVID. There's been a very strong and deep trend to digitalize our supply, mainly with our part suppliers. And frankly speaking, if we had not been on this journey, COVID-19 would have been a much bigger nightmare, if we can imagine bigger. But it would have been, I cannot realize. So yes, we are developing more and more digitalized supply chain, and maybe to make it more practical, we've been in a phase where we were developing more analytics, more visualization, and understanding of the data, the positioning of the parts, what is the picture and the dynamic picture of our parts in the pipelines. And we go more and more to predictive strategy, meaning that where can I suppose the parts to be tomorrow, or what could be the incidents coming from our suppliers, from the transport, from geopolitical events, etc., that will impact the positioning of the parts. And then we are stepping to another era, which is the predictive and the prescriptive, meaning that matching both predictive through AI and robotization, as mentioned by Marc, we are able to have fully, I would say, automatized systems that would take the decision to implement some countermeasures or some action, to adapt the stock, to adapt the request of the parts, in a very complex systems, in an environment where we have to manage massive amounts of data, which cannot be done manually by human in a very short timing, and so much data. So yes, we are on board on this journey. It requires collaboration with our suppliers, with providers of digital solutions like SAP or others, and it requires also to develop skills in our teams. We are onboarding something new. We have to shift in terms of human resources and skills in our teams to onboard people with this knowledge, with this culture of data and digital. That's what we are doing in corporate division in Renault. Also in Turkey, I would say that in Oyak Renault, we have a very skilled people there. We are connecting with the education environment, with the best universities also in Turkey, to develop this kind of resources and skills, which is very key for the future.
Okay, that's great. Well, the whole challenge of managing the data, the data that's generated by digitalization and the technologies that Marc was referring to, is a new skill set indeed. So, John, for the P&G perspective on the digitalization journey, if you like, share with us what your next steps look like on digitizing or digitalizing the supply chain.
Yes, no, I mean, I think we are also very, very fortunate that we have been investing into digitalization of our supply chain, planning, and actually also manufacturing. And that has been a huge help for us, as to many other companies during the pandemic. So in 2012, we took on a big initiative to significantly simplify our global supply chain planning ecosystem and consolidate the supply chain planning from approximately 300 locations to 8 planning service centers globally. This has enabled us first to standardize, then to digitalize the planning processes, significantly improving productivity. And during COVID, what we noticed is that also enabled our people to work completely remotely. So having access to the data, having digital systems available was a huge really enabler for us in the supply chain, a huge enabler to protect our people, enabling them to work remotely completely. At the same time, as a result of that standardization, also we made things like algorithmic planning or robotic process automation and other digitalization tools much easier to implement, because now our whole planning is consolidated into 8 places, a smaller organization, and all these tools have become easier to implement. Where do we see things moving and what we have noticed during COVID-19? Couple of things. One is, I think Jean-François mentioned that, Marc mentioned that, the what-if scenarios that we had to run during the crisis, and we still need to run, have been just enormous. And we see the need for digital twins. How do I really have the digital twin of my supply chain that enables me to optimize it, to run what-if scenarios much faster, and really see what will happen to the supply chain as a result of certain choices that we are making. Also enabling us to predict what will happen. So the digital twin is a focus area for us, and the whole simulation has become a focus area for us for supply chain planning. At the same time, we have seen also the need for digital twins in the manufacturing area, because during the pandemic, we still had to run our innovation programs. We still had to make interventions on our production lines to move to the next product. And in the past, we would have our suppliers, our experts travel to the plants and really work in the plants and do all this work together there. But all of a sudden, we completely lost that chance. And having digital twins of our production lines so that we can do the programming remotely, and having more advanced collaboration tools such that the experts can be in the plant without being there physically. So those areas start becoming extremely important for us. We are looking heavily into digital twins, as I mentioned, for both manufacturing and supply chain planning. And I believe that that will continue to be super important for the whole industry. That's one area. The other very important area is, you mentioned that, the visibility, providing full visibility. So we have a good visibility of our supply chain, but now we see the need to connect also much better digitally with our suppliers, such that we also have visibility in terms of how much inventory do they have. Are they going to face issues? Because this pandemic has shown us that we need to manage this truly end to end. We need to take it to the next level. And really, digitalization is the way to manage it end to end in the fastest way, in the easiest way.
Thank you for those comments. So important aspects there of digital twins coming into reality and giving you that visibility into the what if and the predicting, the scenario modeling, both in your supply chain and the manufacturing. And then this need to have the full visibility end to end throughout not just your own supply chain, but through into your supplier network, if you like, and in turn their supply chains. Okay, great. This is a great discussion, and we're running a bit short of time. I do want to ask our esteemed panelists for their views about Turkey. So this will probably be the last question before I ask you for your final takeaway. So for this last question in the discussion, let us pose the question how Turkey can use the supply chain learnings from COVID-19 to become a regional supplier in the next or never normal after the pandemic, and what Turkey could do to gain a bigger role in reshaping global supply chains in a post-pandemic environment. Torben, may I commence with you on that one, please?
Absolutely. As I mentioned in my introduction, we invested in Turkey in 2018. 3 weeks after we have made this for DFDS historically big investment, the Turkish lira collapsed. by 40%. The resilience of the workers, the people of Turkey, means that this economy is very strong. And I think in order to maximize the benefit of that, it is very important to have a relatively predictable economic strategy. And there we have seen some hesitation in terms of maybe adjusting interest rates, etc., to reality. And it would just be a shame if things like that would prevent companies like Procter & Gamble and Renault, when they redesign for proximity and making sure things don't break down, that they would deselect Turkey because of maybe a little bit lack of economic and maybe to a certain extent some political stability. So it's very, very important, in my opinion, for Turkey to fully capitalize of their fantastic geographical location and their unique access to skilled labor and workforce. That they would lose out on that if they are not able to really signal a firm economic policy. So that's my big hope for Turkey. We are extremely pleased of being such a major part of the export and import to Turkey with our position, and we can just see that this first the trade wars and the global pandemic should position Turkey fantastic for growth from new producers moving to Turkey or expanding current position.
Okay, great, thank you. So Marc, from your SAP perspective, how could Turkey take on a bigger role in reshaping global supply chains?
From SAP, we have always seen our customers in Turkey is really driving technology innovation, really being strong partners in this space, also in the supply chain. For example, when the pandemic hit, we worked with Koç Holding to use what we call employee polls and reach out to thousands and thousands of their employees to see how they were faring during the pandemic, how we could support them better, how could Koç support them better in the process working remotely. So they've been very fast to adopt technology and implement it. Of course, it's also, we see the strength, the industrial, the manufacturing strength throughout the country. Maybe one recommendation is to combine those two. If we can combine that drive of that industrial manufacturing capability, the real power of the nation and these organizations, to open up more to the networks, to share the data in the sense of enabling networks. As we've said throughout this conversation, this never normal is really going to require collaboration across supply chains, with suppliers, with customers, sharing data maybe on carbon footprint, on availability of stocks, of supplier risk. So a stronger focus on collaborating on the networks, on opening up data safely, securely, guaranteeing, of course, privacy. But I think that would be a strong element to really stimulate network approaches, cross-border collaborations, and a stronger focus on those global supply lines.
Okay, thank you, Marc. Jean-François, what's your perspective on how Turkey can better contribute to the reshaping of global supply?
Yes, well, as already said, Turkey has a fantastic positioning in terms of geography and logistics associated to it. So, as we know, with Renault, also an extraordinary footprint in terms of manufacturing, suppliers. So it's important to continue to capitalize on these assets and push further probably on the development of innovation and new skills around digital, around innovative transports, together with the educational environment, so that we continue to push for the really the best possible resources for future supply chain. And I think Turkey has potential and probably an important role to play on this.
Great, thanks, Jean-François. And then, John, I left you to last on this particular topic for obvious reasons. How do you think that your motherland can better participate in the reshaping of global supply chains?
Yeah, no, I will take a bit more time on this question. I think, as we discussed, right, over the last hour, and many companies noticed the negative impact and challenges of the long supply chains and single-sourced materials and products during COVID-19. And there will be a shift from global to regional, and in some cases to local supply chains. Right? I believe that the current extraordinary circumstances will offer new opportunities to many emerging countries, including Turkey, as companies evaluate their global supply chains and focus on their resiliency. So I think that will be important, and I believe that Turkey is in an excellent position because it has a couple of very important strengths. And those, in my mind, I think all the multinational companies operating in Turkey would agree are, young, large, skilled, and eager workforce. A well-developed entrepreneurial culture, and the culture has this can-do attitude and agility, which is super critical. Strategic location, and then strong SMEs with developed manufacturing capabilities. So there are huge advantages for Turkey. I believe that the multinational companies over the years have contributed to the development of the SMEs significantly. And we as P&G have been in Turkey since 1987. We have one multi-category plant that today exports 35% of its production to more than 20 countries in the region. And this is more than $100 million US per year in exports, which keeps increasing every year. And P&G is among the export leaders of Turkey in paper products now for 9 consecutive years, and detergent product for 4 consecutive years. And our plant in Turkey works with approximately 750 suppliers, and around 400 of them are based in Turkey. And 85 of these local suppliers export goods worth of $175 million to other P&G production facilities in Europe, Middle East, and Africa. And 25 years ago, this wasn't the case. We had very few local suppliers in Turkey. So our 33 years of experience and sustainable investment in Turkey created its own encouraging ecosystem for the Turkish SMEs. And now they produce raw and packed materials or services at world standards. And I believe that this trend will continue. The multinational companies being in Turkey, increasing the standards, will help the SMEs significantly. And we have some very good examples of the Turkish companies like Gülsan Nonwoven, Carweb Nonwoven, Elif Plastics. They demonstrate every year very strong quality, cost, service, and innovation performance. And that makes them globally very, very competitive. So there is there are a lot of strengths in Turkey, and I believe that Turkey needs to take advantage of the current situation that we are in, and it has a lot of strengths to take advantage of the current situation that we are in. But I believe that it will take commitment and effort from both the SMEs and government to increase the existence and competitiveness of the Turkish SMEs in the global supply chains. I believe that the SMEs, they need to continue to invest in both the capabilities of the workforce and state-of-the-art technology to deliver high-quality products and service at competitive cost. I believe the government needs to help by providing investment incentives for manufacturing with a focus on, I would really pick a couple of areas, and these are the areas that we discussed, on sustainability, on digitalization and automation. I believe the government needs to help by building strong trade relationships with its neighbors and EU. And then finally, committing 100% compliance to internationally accepted rules, regulations, and standards such as OECD and WTO. I believe when that happens, Turkey will be able to take great advantage of this golden moment, where a lot of companies are looking into moving from global supply chains to regional, and as I said, in some cases to more local supply chains.
Okay, John, thanks very much for that. I'm going to move to the final takeaway. I'll do a little synopsis of that in a second, but the final takeaway, I'm going to ask each of our panelists to share the one key thing, very briefly, the one key thing that they would like our audience to take away from this discussion in respect of how our audience members can move forward with improving their supply chains in a post-pandemic world. So just one key thing from each of our panelists. But just before we go to that, it sounds to me as if Turkey's on the brink of a fantastic opportunity here with a lot of very, very solid foundations in place. And as we get to the next normal or the never normal, whatever the next chapter may be, certainly globalization is going to change. And with its geographical location and its abundant workforce, entrepreneurial style, there are many very solid building blocks in Turkey's favor. And some additional efforts in terms of, we talked about collaborating across the networks, government and SME commitment and a bit more effort, then it's poised to take a very significant role in the future of global supply chains, which will become less global, more regional and more local. So a great conclusion there. So one key takeaway from each of the gentlemen, rapid fire. Let's go with Marc first, please. Marc, your one key takeaway for our audience.
I'll try and say it in one sentence. I think it's been mainly the learning of the experiences and how digital transformation can help become more resilient, more sustainable. But I like very much it also helps create stronger skills in our teams, increase learning, and makes it easier to implement future transformation and face future disruptions. I think that's key learnings I've taken from this conversation. Thank you.
Great, thanks very much, Marc. Nice and brief and succinct. Excellent. Torben, let's come to you, please. Your one key takeaway for our audience.
For us, supply chain is about collaboration and integration.
Thank you very much. And Jean-François?
Yes, for me, it's also a much more collaborative supply chain. And really end-to-end connectivity, meaning more sharing of data among suppliers, among transport companies and OEMs.
Okay, thanks, Jean-François. And last word for Jean.
Yeah, I mean, I think to me it is, I agree, more collaboration to drive resiliency and sustainability.
Okay, great, gentlemen. So key takeaways for our audience. Thank you for participating in this discussion. Collaboration, integration, resilience, sustainability, learning, end-to-end supply chain and digital transformation are key messages for our group. I want to thank sincerely our fantastic panelists for a very wide-ranging and very thoughtful discussion on the future of global supply chains. And we'll conclude our panel discussion there. And thank you all for attending. And once again, thank you to Jean, Jean-François, Marc, and Torben for your excellent, outstanding insights. I really appreciate your participation. Thank you.